Night in Southern California, destroying homes, shutting down highways, and forcing almost 200,000 people tonight to evacuate.
We finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital.
This decision reflects the president's commitment to an ancient but enduring truth, to fulfilling his promises, and to advancing peace.
President after president kept being told, don't do it, you'll mess up the peace process. Well, 22 years later, we haven't had a peace process.
The long knives are out tonight for Al Franken. So why now is the window closing for the senator from Minnesota? Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate, adding his name to the more than 30 lawmakers that came out today, saying that he must go.
I'm proud to be joined by my fellow conservatives in the House to call for an investigation into the FBI's procedures that allowed Hillary Clinton to receive special treatment.
I'm Heather Childers. Let's get right to our top story for you, though. President Trump fulfilling a campaign promise to formally recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the U.S. Embassy.
Previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise. They failed to deliver. I am delivering.
What the president did today was, one, listen to the will of the American people. They just unanimously voted again 6 months ago, Republicans and Democrats, to do this.
Well, the decision sparking a ripple effect all around the world as furious Palestinians burn American flags and hit the streets for days of rage. Let's get right to Connor Powell. He's live for us in Jerusalem for reaction. Good morning, Connor.
Hey, good morning, Heather. Well, sort of two different responses that we're seeing across the region, and not only here in Jerusalem and in Israel. International condemnation by a lot of America's partners in the Arab world and also in Europe who have real concerns that this move could spark violence. But here in Israel, there's been celebration. There has been praise with President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This is a formal declaration. The embassy will still take some time to move. The State Department and the White House need to plan a position here in Jerusalem where they're going to build it. They need to buy the land. They need to design it. So this will take several years, according to White House officials. However, over the night, they here in Israel, as part of the praise for President Trump's decision, they put images of the American flag on Jerusalem's old city. Israeli politicians from across the spectrum, not only conservatives, but in the moderate and liberal parties, they all praise President Trump's decision. Palestinians obviously very frustrated and angry with this decision. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, says this undermines the ability of the United States to be the honest broker in the peace agreement. And they are very upset that this sort of removes one of the main issues that had been agreed upon to be a negotiated settlement in terms of a peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. Saudi Arabia called the move irresponsible, while the UK Prime Minister Theresa May said the move is not helpful in the pursuit of peace. Now, in terms of violence, we really haven't seen much in the way of Palestinian protests getting violent. There were some protests in Bethlehem and Ramallah in the last 24 hours where they burned some American flags and pictures of President Trump. But we haven't seen mass protests that have turned violent or anything like that here. It's been fairly muted by both Israelis and Palestinians here in terms of on-the-street demonstrations. That could change in the next 48 hours, as there have been calls by Palestinian leaders for days of rage. But it isn't clear, Heather, whether or not this will turn into sort of mass protests on the street. There are some commercial strikes right now here in East Jerusalem, but so far not the violence that had been predicted.
Thankfully. Connor, we're going to talk much more about this throughout the show. Thank you so much. We appreciate your report. Well, the president's announcement being met with some swift backlash from leaders all around the Arab world. But Ron Dermer, who serves as Israel's ambassador to the United States, he says that it should be met with praise because it keeps the hope for peace alive.
People recognize in the Arab world that Israel is not their enemy, but a potential ally to deal with these challenges. I think President Trump recognizes that as well, and that affords a historic opportunity for peace. I think what the president has done right now in this decision has actually helped us advance peace by starting to deal with reality and truth in our region. It's a historic decision. It's not just the president since the Jerusalem Embassy Act was signed about 20 years ago. It's all the presidents since the State of Israel was established. There were 12 previous presidents and none of them actually recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and it's been our capital since 1949 of the state of Israel. It's been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years, and the Jewish people and the Jewish state will be eternally grateful to President Trump for making this decision.
Now to another Fox News alert for you. Look at this. The fierce fight. It is just a huge battle right now. Wildfires all across California intensifying. Hundreds of firefighters, they're working around the clock trying to get the furious flames under control. But as you look at this, the worst maybe yet to come, believe it or not. Jonathan Hunt live in Santa Paula, where the next 24 hours could actually prove the most dangerous. Jonathan, what's to come?
Yeah, Heather, the warm Santa Ana winds that have been fanning these fires are expected to gust over the next 24 hours up to 80 miles per hour. That would mean you've got a combination of wildfires and hurricane-force winds. And as you take a look at the flames behind me in the hills right above Santa Paula, you can just imagine what kind of a deadly and dangerous combination that makes. This is part of the Thomas fire. That has now burned some 95,000 acres. There are almost 2,000 firefighters on the lines here, some of them right in front of us, trying to keep these flames from burning more homes. They've so far taken something like 150 homes in the area around the city of Ventura, Santa Paula being just outside of the city of Ventura. There's also been other fires, as you know, across Southern California. One of the most dangerous today was in the famous and wealthy enclave of Bel Air, right along the side of the 405 freeway, one of the busiest in L.A. The Bel Air area, home to many multi-million-dollar mansions. 4 homes, we are told, were destroyed in that fire. Flames are still burning, although the L.A. Fire Department believes they do have a pretty good hold on that fire right now. But fire departments across Southern California are on very, very high alert and will remain so for the next 24 to 36 hours, Heather, because of the Santa Ana winds, which have been so destructive. The California Forestry Division has a way of ranking those winds, purple being the highest level of warning. It has never been set at purple before. Today it is the highest level of wind warning we have ever had in Southern California. These are going to be a very dangerous 24 hours, Heather.
Jonathan, I mean, just looking at the images right there of you standing with those flames and that smoke behind you, what does it feel like? What does it smell like where you are right now?
Well, we've all, over the last couple of days that we've been here, we've all been doing our best not to inhale too much of this air. We've been wearing the masks whenever we can. You feel it. You can see the dust in the air. You can smell the smoke. It is acrid. It is really quite awful to be in the middle of. That is why the fire departments have been so keen to get everybody out of these areas. So many schools have been closed down as well in this area and will remain closed all week, because the air quality simply is too dangerous for children and others to be out in, Heather. So it's a pretty bad scene here, and it's only going to get worse over the next 24 hours, as I say. Jonathan, thank you so much for bringing us the report, and be careful out there. And to all those firefighters. All right. Well, the parents accused of the Tampa serial killer, I should say, could also face some jail time. His parents, Howell and Rosita Donaldson, they say that they won't testify against their son despite a subpoena, even if it means they'll face criminal charges. A hearing is being held today to determine whether they should be charged with contempt. Investigators want to know about their son, Howell III. He's accused of murdering 4 people. And the wife of the ISIS-inspired gunman who killed 49 people at an Orlando nightclub will stand trial in that city. A judge rejecting Noor Solomon's request to move the case over concerns that media coverage would not allow her to get a fair trial. Prosecutors say that she knew about her husband, Omar Mateen's deadly plans at the Pulse nightclub. She's charged with providing material support to a terror organization and obstruction of justice. Solomon is due in court in March.
Well, House Republicans demanding some answers over thousands of text messages involving the FBI agent kicked off of the special counsel's Russia probe. Todd Pirro joins us now with what those anti-Trump messages could mean for the investigation. Todd, a story we've been following closely.
Yeah, this one is getting bigger by the day. The Capitol Hill hot seat welcomes another high-profile government official today, with FBI Director Christopher Wray expected to be questioned about those texts. Right now, Justice Department officials are reading through over 10,000 texts between FBI official Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now, FBI counterintelligence agent Strzok worked on the Robert Mueller Russia probe, but was reassigned after the discovery of anti-Trump text messages exchanged with Page, with whom he was having an affair. The disclosure of those messages bolstered Republican concerns about the objectivity of Mueller's probe, although it's unclear how many of the texts have anything to do with Trump or the probe itself. Strzok was present, as you'll recall, during the FBI's July 2016 interview with Hillary Clinton over her private email server shortly before then FBI Director James Comey called her actions extremely careless without recommending criminal charges.
I'm proud to be joined by my fellow conservatives in the House to call for an investigation into the FBI's procedures that allowed Hillary Clinton to receive special treatment. We'll also investigate the unprecedented bias against President Trump.
Justice Department officials say the process of reading and redacting those texts could take weeks. Meantime, Donald Trump Jr. told House investigators yesterday that he did not talk to his father about his June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer at the time that it happened.
Man,
Heather?
10,000 texts.
That's
I can't even
lot.
get past that part.
I mean, I think about how many I sent with my wife.
Yeah, I was going to say,
10,000.
when were they working?
Right.
All right, thank you so much, Todd. Appreciate it. Well, the time now is about 12 minutes after the top of the hour, and day of rage. Protesters burning the American flag after President Trump's Jerusalem announcement. But our next guest, an expert on foreign relations, says that the riots only prove the courage of our commander-in-chief. And remember when liberals screamed at the sky over President Trump? Way too early for that. Well, their new message for anyone daring to call them snowflakes. Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. U.S. designated terror group Hamas now calling for 3 days of rage in response to the president's declaration of Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. As protesters take to the streets to burn flags and denounce the historic decision, it is a monumental moment for our allies in Israel. But could this push the world further apart from a peace agreement in that region? Here now to react is the managing director of the Israel Project, Omri Sarin. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. So
the fires, the protesting, burning the American flag, the Israeli flag, it's already begun.
Yeah, it has already begun, and we don't know how bad it'll get. The administration knew that something like this was going to happen, and they budgeted in. But what they decided was that the cost of not doing it was outweighed by the cost of doing it. Really, what they wanted to make sure was that the president lived up to his campaign promise, which was to recognize Jerusalem as the capital.
Right, and moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem as well.
That's right. He began the process of locating a place, building it out. You know, this will take years, and the administration's been very forthright that it'll take years. We have standards for our embassies. It takes time.
And is that a compromise in a way? Because from what I understand from some of the reports I've read, there was a place where they could have, opened it almost immediately.
Yeah, we have a couple of places in Jerusalem where we can place our diplomats, and they're all candidates. But really what the president wants to make sure and the administration wants to make sure is that the process is followed, that there's security when it finally opens. The State Department has very strict guidelines on these things, and it takes years.
And Benjamin Netanyahu used the word courageous and just in terms of what President Trump announced yesterday.
I think that that's exactly right. The president faced international opposition. He faced domestic opposition. But really, he looked at this and he said, Jerusalem is Israel's capital. In reality, this is where the Israelis run their government out of. And it's time to acknowledge that, in addition to the fact that it's American law for over 20 years.
Yeah, it was a congressional mandate. Going back, 25 years? Right. In 1995, Congress enacted this Jerusalem Embassy Act?
That's right. Congress said, in as many words, that it's U.S. policy that Jerusalem is Israel's capital, that we should move the embassy there. And this has been Congress's view all the way through summer of this year. In June of 2017, there was a Senate resolution that passed 90-0 calling on the president to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, which is why it's so absurd that Democrats are coming out against him right now.
That's what I was going to ask you. So why are Democrats against it now? Because it's President Trump versus President Obama?
This is one of the things people are talking about this morning. You know, it's very difficult to figure out why Democrats like Senator Feinstein, who just a few months ago was saying that the embassy should be moved and that Israel's capital should be recognized, is now coming out against it and saying that it's a bad idea.
Yeah, in terms of the UN and former President Obama, who I just mentioned, he didn't do Israel any favors there, though.
No, in fact, almost exactly a year ago, we were looking at a situation in which the Obama administration was was twisting arms with some countries, working with other countries to actually deny Israel's right to all of their historic capital in Jerusalem. And one of the most important parts of what President Trump did yesterday is he said effectively that that's not what U.S. policy is, that U.S. policy is what it's always been, which is that Jerusalem is Israel's capital.
All right. Well, 3 days of rage Palestinians calling for, or Hamas is calling for, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully that will not occur.
Hopefully.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll follow you on Twitter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, still coming up, he risked his life running into gunfire at the Pulse nightclub massacre.
It's a horrible feeling because this man, Omar, he has been there for me ever since June 12th. He's the person who saved my life.
Well, that officer is now out of a job and at risk of losing his pension. An exclusive interview when Corporal Omar Delgado joins us live. Stay tuned for that. And cancel your plans. That message from the NAACP to President Trump over his visit to a civil rights museum. While our next guest says that this is about politics, not race. Well, the NAACP telling President Trump not to bother showing up for the opening celebration of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, calling his upcoming visit a slap in the face to minorities. Here to discuss is Republican strategist Chris Prudhomme. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Chris. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Very early. So the NAACP says that this is an insult. Do you agree?
No. Absolutely not. This has nothing to do with the advancement of minorities, which is what their mission stands for. This has to do with the advancement of their own political agenda. This is completely ridiculous and an insult to me as an African-American and as a minority. Look, this is a time of bringing the country together. President Trump has a lot of things to do on his agenda. He has a lot he can be doing this weekend. That being said, he chose on his very busy agenda, one of the things to go to the opening of the Civil Rights Museum. He does not have to go. So by him going is a show of strength, it's a show of unity, and a show of bringing the country together. These type of things are the rhetoric that they continue to perpetuate to continue to divide America apart.
Well, let's take a look specifically at what the NAACP president, Derek Johnson, had to say. He called the president's attendance an affront to civil rights, saying this: President Trump's statements and policies regarding the protection and enforcement of civil rights have been abysmal, and his attendance is an affront to the veterans of the civil rights movement. He's created a commission to reinforce voter suppression, refused to denounce white supremacists, and overall has created a racially hostile climate in this nation. So how do we come together if you're not willing to even talk or have the president, there?
Look, I'll be honest, I don't think they want to come together. I think they want to continue the rhetoric, the divisiveness for the fundraising effort, hence the impeachment nonsense that went on yesterday. This is all about creating and continuing perpetuating the divisive rhetoric. Again, it's time to bring the country together. Look, they could say, President Trump, we want these 20 things or 10 things on a checklist. He can give them all to them and they would still not be happy. This has nothing to do with bringing things together. The NAACP, look, these guys have been around for a long time and have done some good things. And look, it's just, again, a lot of rhetoric that just continues to perpetuate the system. And this is the reason why we continue to have this drama and this nonsense here in America today when it's time to bring focus. And it's really sad because we're showing other young people, other millennials, and we're showing people across America that this is what the agenda is when it's actually not the agenda. The fact that President Trump is going, to me, is showing the fight against racism. It's going against, obviously, what white supremacists stand for. He's going because he does care and he does want to show show of unity and strength. This is why he's attending the event. They should be happy that he's coming to the civil rights opening of the museum.
Right. Is it reverse racism? Is that going on?
Look, I certainly do think that it certainly does have a big impact, and I would venture as far as to say yes, because we talk about how we want President Trump to be, as a whole, the country. People say, okay, they want him to be more involved in minority issues and listen to minority ears, and great. Guess what? He's doing that. But when you say, well, actually, Mr. President, we don't want you to come, we don't want you to be a part of this or that, well, wait a minute. You say you want him to be a part of it, but then you don't want him to be a part of it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I would say it's reverse racism.
Yeah.
Because the fact is he's doing and making an attempt to be a part and to be more culturally sound. And look, the thing is this, he'll probably go there and he'll probably learn something from it. And we should want that.
Yeah, and all the things there that the NAACP president said, if he believes those to be true, then have the conversation. And
That's
a great
right.
way to actually have it in person. Not a lot of people get to do that.
No, they certainly don't. And they refuse meetings. They refuse to have panel discussions and town halls and sit down. I mean, this is about getting things done and bringing America together.
Yeah, it takes two sides. Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate you joining us this morning.
No problem. Thanks.
Well, it is the question that everyone wants an answer to. How was a 5-time deported illegal immigrant acquitted of murder?
None of that was discussed during the trial. We were told at the beginning of the trial that immigration was not at issue in this trial. It did not pertain to the evidence or the law surrounding the specific charges that were at issue.
Yeah, you definitely want to hear this. The juror breaking his silence this morning, what he said about Kate Steinle's killer, skating on even a manslaughter charge.
Done.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. 4:31 here on the East Coast. Senator Al Franken, there he is. He's expected to make a big move today, a big announcement, following an avalanche of sexual assault allegations that just keeps getting bigger. Now, this comes as a Democratic chorus rises in the Senate demanding that he bow out. Griff Jenkins live from our nation's capital with the new details on the liberal women now leading the charge. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Heather. If he indeed resigns later today, as we expect, it will be the Democratic women of the U.S. Senate that brought the pressure to bear, and a 7th accuser coming forward charging Franken tried to forcibly kiss her, adding to the long list of sexual misconduct allegations. By the end of the day yesterday, at least 14 female Democratic senators were calling for the comedian turned actor to resign, including his fellow Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, stopping short of calling him to resign, but saying in a tweet that she expected him to make the right decision. The tidal wave, though, began with New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand leading the charge.
I do not feel that he should continue to serve. When we start having to talk about the differences between sexual assault and sexual harassment and unwanted groping, you are having the wrong conversation. You need to draw a line in the sand and say none of it is okay. None of it is acceptable.
It was first reported by Minnesota Public Radio that Franken would be resigning, but his office quickly downplaying the report, tweeting Senator Franken is talking with his family at this time and plans to make an announcement in D.C. tomorrow. Any reports of a final decision are inaccurate, but the pressure has only grown. Senator Minority Leader Chuck Schumer ignoring the chorus of calls, saying in a statement, Senator Franken should resign. I consider Franken a dear friend and greatly respect his accomplishments, but he has a higher obligation to his constituents in the Senate, and he should step down immediately. We'll see what the day brings, Heather.
All right, we'll see if he follows that advice. Griff Jenkins live for us. Thank you. Well, of course, first, John Conyers announced his resignation. Now that call from Democrats calling for Franken to call it quits. A conservative columnist, Monica Crowley, says that there's something much bigger going on here, and the left has ulterior motives upon forcing their party members out.
It's politics, but it's also very strategic because they're teeing this up for 2018 and then 2020. They want to say, look, we took care of all of our perverts. We got rid of all of them. Oh, the Republicans still have a bunch of perverts. We're also going to run a woman. We're going to run Kamala Harris out of California for president, or we're going to run Michelle Obama for president. They are teeing this up. So they're setting up.
Repeat that again. They're going to run Michelle Obama for president.
Strongest in the polls.
And they're going to run a minority woman. Mark my words. You heard it here first. It's either going to be California Senator Kamala Harris or Michelle Obama. And they are teeing up this political moment, marrying it to the cultural moment so that they can achieve that goal.
And meanwhile, a bombshell new report. Did you hear about this? About the man in line to replace disgraced Democrat John Conyers? His son, John Conyers III, apparently arrested in February of this year. He's accused of stabbing and body slamming his girlfriend. Now, the revelation coming just hours after the former congressman endorsed his son to fill his seat. The girlfriend saying that the incident was over cheating accusations. The charges were dropped over a lack of evidence. One alternate juror speaking out just days after an illegal immigrant is found not guilty in the death of Kate Steinle. That juror reveals that the fact that the killer had been deported 5 times was virtually ignored.
None of that was discussed during the trial. We were told at the beginning of the trial that immigration was not at issue in this trial. It did not pertain to the evidence or the law surrounding the specific charges that were at issue. The jury had to use the crime that was specified by the prosecutor, and in this case, that was specified as brandishing of a weapon. When that was read to us in the jury instructions at the end of the trial, right before the closing arguments, I think that was the first time that we'd heard the word brandishing during this 5-week trial. There's no evidence that the defendant did that.
In that controversial decision, a California jury acquitted Jose Inez Garcia Zarate of murder and manslaughter. Instead, the shooting in the sanctuary city of San Francisco painted it as an accident. Zarate now faces federal weapons charges. Some shocking videos showing a mall security guard dragging from a speeding SUV, being dragged. It was driven by suspected shoplifters. New Jersey police say that the man hit his head hard, slamming into the ground, and then was rushed to the hospital with a concussion as a result of all that. Officers now looking for these 3 suspects who were spotted in a Lord & Taylor department store stealing items. The trio then hopping into this rented white Nissan SUV. They're now facing aggravated assault charges. He is lucky. Well, now to a Fox News alert for you. It's not a matter of if, but when we go to war. North Korea's brand new chilling warning as the U.S. Air Force makes a show of force over the Korean Peninsula. Kitty Logan is live for us in London with a look at your international headlines this morning. Good morning, Kitty.
Good morning. Well, yes, its objections to those ongoing U.S. and South Korean military exercises. The government in Pyongyang has upped its rhetoric, saying that war on the Korean Peninsula may be inevitable. Now, these comments come after a U.S. supersonic bomber flew over South Korea yesterday in a show of force as part of that large week-long military exercise. More than 200 aircraft taking part, including American fighter jets. Now, South Korea's military says this is to demonstrate a capability to respond to any threat from the north. Now, meanwhile, U.S. security officials have warned that ISIS is still capable of influencing its followers online, despite recent defeats on the ground in Iraq and Syria.
It is good that we have, by and large, taken away the physical caliphate. We have in no way, shape, or form denied them the cyber caliphate, and that may be a more persistent long-term threat.
Now, the US-led coalition says that there are currently less than 3,000 fighters left in Iraq and Syria. But the question is now, where do those fighters go, and do they resume their influence in the cyberspace? Heather?
All right, Kitty Logan live for us this morning. Thank you, Kitty. Well, a warning from GOP Chairman Ron Johnson coming just days after a terrifying ISIS plot to assassinate British Prime Minister Theresa May was thwarted. So how is the Trump administration addressing the evolving terror threat here at home? Here now to weigh in is former U.S. Army Special Forces operator and the president of Security Studies Group, Jim Hansen. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you here.
Good to be with you, Heather.
So the foiled plot to assassinate Theresa May, what does that point out to you in terms of terrorist groups and what they're planning?
Well, they're not aiming low. I mean, if they're trying to actually take out the British Prime Minister, that's an amazingly powerful message. We all need to be very vigilant. I think what's scary is there are tens of thousands of people on the British terror watch lists. And sadly, those are really the least competent terrorists by managing to get themselves flagged before they've done anything. So they're going to have a difficulty of sorting through that, determining which are the real threats, and then being able to take action, which which they did in this case before a terrorist incident occurs.
Yeah, the two suspects named were 20 and 21 years old from London and Birmingham. The Pentagon yesterday also announced that top leaders from al-Qaeda and the Taliban had been killed by U.S. forces. What do you know about that?
I think we're constantly trying to take out al-Qaeda and Taliban members or ISIS members or anyone we can identify around the world. Best place to kill them is overseas. However, it's important to note the Supreme Court just upheld President Trump's travel ban, which is a vital tool to allow the president to stop these terrorists from coming to the United States. We can't have liberal activist judges pretending to be our national security apparatus and fighting President Trump and trying to keep us safe. So that's a step in the right direction, giving him the tools he needs.
Jim, in terms of the information that we receive in the media, information that's released to the public, I would assume that that's released for a reason. And why do you think this information has been released right now?
I think what President Trump and the rest of our national security team is doing is sending a message to the terrorists, saying, don't come here. We take this serious. We are not, A, going to allow you in here, B, we are going to scrutinize people here who may be potential terrorists before they conduct an attack. As you reported earlier, Omar Mateen, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando shooter who killed 49 people, his wife's going on trial for failing to report his plans. He had been radicalized by hearing that the penalty for homosexuality is death in mosques and in online teachings. That's something we have to keep an eye on. Who's trying to give these people rationale to kill in their Islamist belief?
Yeah, and then you also point out activist judges then injecting, their partisan political views.
They have no reason to be doing that. Their job is to decide whether the president's actions were following the law. It is obvious that President Trump, under both the Constitution and existing law, can stop anyone he deems a security threat from entering the United States. Just because some guy in Hawaii has decided he doesn't think the president is doing this for a reason he likes, he has no right to beat the separation of powers in the Constitution and stop the president from keeping all of us safe.
Yeah. All right. That's a great way to end it there. Thank you so much, Jim. We appreciate your insight as always. And you know firsthand what it takes to beat these terrorists. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Heather.